Hey everyone, in this video I want to share 7 decent RPGs. Games that aren't bad, but aren't good either. These are entries that have interesting ideas, but also gimmicks in between, which ultimately weigh down the experience. And some may be close to good RPGs according to my point of view, but that is subjective, reason why there's no underrated level. Maybe not the best for the channel, but I prefer to keep things real. In any case, if you have played a decent game you can recommend, let us know. Without further ado, and in no particular order, let's begin. I want to open with a game that was most likely inspired by Odyssey. Lost Epic is a Souls-like platformer with RPG elements, not to be confused with a Metroidvania, cause there's minimum backtrack involved. There's one point where you will need to check the whole map, but I'll let you find that on your own. There's a premise in this game, but sometimes it can feel a bit too simple, considering that you're a knight, a member of the Perishing, who tries to fight against the Holy Ones and new gods, as they torment your people, and it is up to the knights to seize all of these conflicts. On this front, the Holy Ones are humans who shapeshift, depending from the god they serve. With that and some other not-so-hidden truths, you are thrown into the fray, where you will have to traverse different levels. For the most part they aren't that complicated, but there are interesting secrets and hidden things here and there. What I can recommend is to check the rooms as meticulously as possible. In some you will find pieces that will help you unlock things as you advance, but don't worry that much if you miss them. In any case, you will find some special weapons to move forward. Now the challenging part comes with bosses, as they aren't that easy to manage. You will need to understand their moves, as well as the limitations from your weapons and skills, so expect to retry things a decent number of times. At least, on that front what I loved is that later some of these enemies are kinda relentless. They kinda push you to get how some bosses work, while pretty much preparing you for some challenges ahead. Then again, do not stress as you advance. Just try to check different weapons, skills, and points where they serve the most. Each group of weapon will let you know what you need to increase to get the most out of them. And in case you mess things up, the game will give you different options to change attributes. Let's continue with Wizardry, Proving Grounds of Mad Overlord. Now here there is pretty much no story, just a robber and lots of naive adventures in search of riches and some glory just because. So you take some members from here and there, or create them however you like them, and dive into the dungeon. Because who doesn't dream to live in a dungeon while passing through their evil cycle? Now there are multiple options in this game. Some maps will change, difficulties, the way in which the levels affect your characters, and so on. In other words, take some beats to read what they change and prepare yourself for a raw adventure. If you don't want to overly complicate the journey, add the minimap as well as the chance to use Duma Peak, things that will help you find your way. And aside from that, it is all about leveling up a bit here and there, while moving forward in a kind of a slowly way. On this front, I recommend to avoid the usage of guides, cause this game is kinda short, and if you have the chance to see the layouts, the experience is just not that good. With that in mind, just take a step at a time. There are floors where enemies and RNGs will be against you, so always try to prepare for the worst. Running away is better than watching your best units die. Aside from that, it is all about leveling up and reclassing to get better jobs, skills, and chances to survive while managing few pieces of equipment. Just a word of advice: if you find a pricey ring with menacing name, just sell it, don't say I didn't warn you. Madou Monogatari Fia and the Wondrous Academy is another of those games that pass under the water, yes, through the rocks and all that stuff. The premise here is entertaining, more like a parody about a girl named Fia, magician who traveled by foot. She had to survive a whole crusade, just to notice that she was late. Really late for the entrance exam. However, she is quite lucky and got accepted, cause luck is an important part about magic. And that is pretty much how we follow Fia in another crusade to become into a great magician. Along the journey other characters will join your cause, while somehow Fia barely passes her test. In due time she will be fighting strong entities, just because she wasn't able to read the room. But that is the charm of this adventure, while also bringing some references about old Madou Monogatari games. Here you will have to do different kinds of tasks, like reaching specific floors or having to beat specific enemies. Every time you enter into the dungeon, floors, enemies, cooking spots, and everything else will be thrown in random ways. At first, it isn't that big of a deal. But later, it is important to check your vitality as you advance, so take your time to be prepared. It is important in late dungeons. Once you enter in contact with an enemy, you are thrown into these small areas, where you can move around casting spells or using physical skills to beat the foes. Keep in mind that your partners can be balanced, depending what you want them to do. Then again, at first it isn't that big of a deal, until the second half where enemies may turn kinda hard, especially some boss battles that can melt your team in matter of seconds. So it is all about managing your skills, jobs, and trying to get the right attributes to spam special moves like there's no tomorrow, especially against hard enemies. Next, I want to share Class of Heroes 3. Now here there is also a rather basic premise, but everything is going to depend from the school you choose. Keep in mind that the story will change a bit here and there, but don't worry about that. Later, as you advance, you will be able to get what the other schools offer. For the most part, this game follows a similar wizardry formula, plus some extra mandatory subquests. In general, it is a trivial tale where you will be hearing stories of old times, ironically about other schools, so that is not the strongest of points here. Kinda funny but dumb at the same time. Its gameplay is where things get interesting if you enjoy the RPGs. Yeah, it sounds like a commercial, but first-person dungeon crawlers are a thing here. And yes, I know I have some pending topics. Soonish, eventually. Depending from the school you choose, there will be some jobs at hand, plus special ones depending from each race. Later, it is possible to add secondary jobs, but that doesn't mean things get kinda complex. The mechanics given to you are rather simple, so it is all about keeping at this information. Upgrade your equipment as you advance, farm from time to time, and synergize your team. And inevitably, as you move forward, you will unlock other things. However, keep in mind that you also need to complete some subquests to unlock every option. For the most part, there is no real need to get them, but as always, the more options the better. However, there is no need to break your head. Every now and then there will be some difficulty spikes, but there are multiple quests that can be done as you advance, so you can always move around depending what you can do, and come back later for some of those tasks. Unfortunately, in the second half is where it turns a bit more into a straight line, until you reach the post-content, where once again things will open a bit more. Aside from that, expect some challenging and trivial battles, cause the difficulty can be like a roller coaster, but at least this game isn't as unforgiving as the first entry in the series. Fairy Fencer Refrain Chord is the continuation from Advent Dark Force, so ideally you should play that game before jumping here, otherwise some little details may pass over your head. However, it is not strictly needed, as you will get a small summary, and then continue the story, where once again Fang is thrown into the jail. We could say that the next important point in this whole mess is when they get to meet the Muses, Fleur and Glace, as well as other characters who pull the strings in this world. In general, it is an entertaining story, but I won't deny that there are multiple silly things. Down the line is where the tale gets serious, ultimately explaining more or less what is going on in this world and some fairies. Yeah, it is fair to mention that there is a cliffhanger at the end, but I believe it ended with a good tone. Gameplay-wise, ironically this game changed into a strategic RPG, which is a bit sad considering it had some interesting ideas. Whatever the case, per stage you will have simple objectives. As you advance, the role between Fleur and Glace will decide the outcome of some fights, because they can boost some nasty buffs, which can turn some attacks into nukes. That is actually the whole deal with this game, and unfortunately, that is also part of its downfall, because it is a cool idea, but once you have seen it multiple times, it is all about working around it, and that's pretty much about it. Sure, in some points the difficulty spikes will feel kinda heavy, but if you understood those mechanics rather well, it is all about pushing that part of the team into the offensive, at least choking between physical and magical moves. Outside of battles, it is all about managing your furies and synergizing the kind of strategy that you want to throw. There is a big area where you can mine, but here is where some sponges may appear, as well as the juicy rewards, so it is all about balancing the exploration and stages. It is worth mentioning that what I love the most is how the OST was fused between Fleur and Glace songs. While the songs are kinda short, the combinations are simply amazing. I have shared a couple of times this game, so I'll be brief. Demon Gaze 2 is the continuation from the first entry. You don't really need to play the first game to get this tale, unless you want to play the post-content. However, with that in mind, I prefer the first entry slightly more, because it gives you the chance to make your whole party. And that is partially where this game falls back, because here each character has two roles since the get-go. Peg is a priest and paladin at the same time, so she is pretty much locked into that role. And while it is possible to add other secondary skills, things may turn sour later because she's trying to accomplish two roles at the same time, and ideally, it is better to have specialized support members than all in one. In any case, the MC of this game is rescued from being fried. And there is also an interesting critique. Yes, you have to read between lines, but it is an interesting premise. Where it doesn't flow that well is with the kind of aesthetic used. Well, all of that is just a piece of the state of affairs, because this game is crunchy as heck. And that is where it shines the most. Battles are rather complicated, and the post-content pushes you to get unorthodox solutions, or patch deficiencies, so it can turn into a nerve-wracking experience. Best solution I can give is 2 weapons, and make your offensive units roll like there's no tomorrow, unless you want to headbang a wall because some bosses have nasty regenerations. Aside from that, expect some good farming sessions, at least considering that you can get plenty of nice things. As honorable mention, Labyrinth no Kanata. It has an interesting premise, but I haven't continued the game, so I cannot say if it is good or bad. But at least the first 30 minutes can be a bit slow, and it follows a classic rock paper scissors idea. Aside from that, you can get a translation in the mid of the sea if you know what I mean. And to close the curtain, The Lost Child. In this game we follow Hayato, character who works publishing things about the occult, and what a ride the one he will have to take here, because he was close to be turned into minced meat. A girl saved him and gave him a case, kinda peculiar and fancy if you ask me. Time later, another girl who claims she is an angel gets close to Hayato, and things just start to go downhill, as this case is quite important, holding a weapon capable to capture demons and use them in combat. From here on out, heaven and hell start to go after this duo. Now, the idea of this game is rather interesting, but to be honest, I don't think it delivers that well, considering how it was written, which in any case I prefer if you guys check it on your own. That was just my opinion on the matter. This is another DRPG where we have a system kinda similar to the first SMT games. In general, the dungeons are kinda entertaining, with some puzzles to crack up with your head, but nothing impossible or gimmicky, but slightly challenging in some areas. Where it turns closer to SMT is that you will be capturing demons left and right, demons who will also give experience depending from their alignment. Best recommendation I can give on this front is try to have one of each alignment, otherwise they are going to fight for experience points during the whole journey into a grindfest. And some bosses may turn quite nasty, considering that they can abuse from some moves, so always try to improve your team. Check the general rank they have and slowly get the higher ones. Nonetheless, keep in mind that they will need a lot of experience to evolve, plus special items, which only appear in a special treasure chest, and with some luck. What it doesn't work that well for me is considering the diversity of demons you will have later, at least regarding their elements. I believe things could have been balanced into something better. Aside from those details, it was worth playing it. And that's pretty much about it. I hope you found this video informative. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.